What people don't understand about addiction, which is actually the reason why I decline most invitations to speak about the topic, is that people think that addiction has to do with drugs and alcohol. And it has really very, very little to do with drugs and alcohol. First of all, there are other addictions. People become addicted to behaviors or to people, relationships. It doesn't have to be a chemical. But secondly, and much more importantly, what people don't get is that the drug that the person is using to numb themselves is not the problem, it's the solution. I'll say it again. The drug is not the problem. The drug is the solution. Yeah, it's a solution that destroys your life, but it's a solution nonetheless. Meaning to say, the real issue of addiction is the underlying issue that the addict is attempting to address through the self-numbing behavior of the drug of choice. And what is that underlying condition? Very, very, very simple. A deep discomfort with one's own self. It's like being allergic to one's own self, uncomfortable in your own skin, terminally unique, lonely in a crowded room, always wanting to feel a part of, instead feeling apart from. And that is that gnawing feeling that the drug or the alcohol, the high-risk behavior is being used to numb the person from, to distract them from. One of the things people are baffled by is how someone who's an addict or an alcoholic will consume their drug to a point of self-obliteration. And people who love them will plead with them, "You're destroying yourself." What they don't understand is, what do you think they're trying to do? Destroy self. Drugs and alcohol are not the problem. Self-consciousness is the problem. And for someone who has an acute and crippling case of self-awareness, they will literally try to use all types of distractions, chemical or otherwise, to deaden that sensitivity so that they can have relief from it. So when you tell them, "Oh, you're destroying self," yeah, exactly. I'm trying to obliterate this separate sense of self called the ego so that I can finally be at peace. Now, the real solution, and the only solution that I know of to be effective, is to experience that relief from self-consciousness through self-transcendence and ultimately God consciousness. The history of the 12-step program. So the first 12-step program was Alcoholics Anonymous. It started in the 30s. What people don't know is that the way it started is that there was an American playboy, a young, rich, privileged kid from New England, who went to Switzerland to be treated for his alcoholism by Dr. Carl Jung, who was one of the great psychiatrists of his day. It was Jung who told this patient, whose name was Roland, that his solution would be a vital spiritual experience. Roland told it to his friend, who told it to his friend, who ended up being one of the two co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill W. And that's where it starts from. So the 12-step approach, that recovery from alcoholism, and ultimately it was used to treat other addictions, that is a spiritual approach, it really goes back to Carl Jung. What people don't realize is that Carl Jung almost didn't share that information with that patient. And in 1961, months before his passing, it was one of the last letters that Jung wrote before he fell ill and passed away. He writes to Bill W. and he reveals that he almost didn't share that perspective with the patient. He said he was afraid of being criticized because as a man of medicine, he starts speaking about spirituality and people have their prejudices, and he almost didn't want to tell Roland, this patient, that the real solution was a spiritual solution. But what Jung says in this letter, it's an amazing concept. He said, what I saw in the patient was that the patient's craving for alcohol was a lower level manifestation of man's thirst for union with God. In other words, what was this person looking for? He was looking for that profound sense of self-transcendence and okayness that we get when we release ourselves, we rise above the separate ego, and we become one with the all, with the everything. That's what he was really looking for. He didn't know that's what he was looking for, and instead he was simulating that through self-medicating, through numbing with a chemical. And that's the key. The key is, you can't just take away someone's bottle and say, and now just go sit there and be miserable with yourself and hating life. You have to give them what they were looking for all along, which is the peace, the serenity, the wholeness that we get through spiritual awakening.